Let's talk about the question everyone in tech is secretly wondering. Will AI replace software engineers? Right, you've got screenshots of ChatGPT building apps, people bragging about firing their dev team, and that one guy claiming he shipped an entire startup using only prompts. I'm Josh, software exec, former startup founder and consultant, and on this channel we crack open the secrets of the software industry. I get it, a few years ago, the idea that AI could code anything at all would have sounded like science fiction. But now you can literally tell a model, build me a website where people can share photos, and it'll do something that kinda works. And that's impressive. So are we watching the extinction of engineering in real time? The truth is a little more interesting than just yes or no. See, AI is incredible at pattern replication. It's seen more examples of code than any human ever will, right? It's digested decades of open source projects, documentation, tutorials, Stack Overflow answers, and probably even your old GitHub repos from college. But think about that for a second. It learned from your old college code. So when you ask it to build something, it's not thinking about the problem. It's recognizing a pattern and saying, all right, this kind of request usually looks like this kind of code. And it's really good at filling in those blanks. And that's why it can kind of feel like magic, but also why it sometimes gives you code that looks right, but completely falls apart when you try to actually run it. Because AI doesn't understand what it's building. It doesn't reason about user needs or business logic or scalability or security or trade-offs. It doesn't ask, what happens when we have a million users, or how does this fit in to the company's existing systems? It just predicts the next likely pattern. And that's where humans, real software engineers, will still win out, right? Because building software has never been just about writing code. It's about solving problems through systems. You need to understand the messy reality underneath, right? The requirements that change halfway through, the data that doesn't behave, the deadlines that conflict, the security constraints that weren't mentioned until production. AI doesn't navigate that chaos well. It doesn't prioritize. It doesn't understand the context beyond what you tell it. And that's the biggest limitation right now. When we say AI can code, we're talking about a very, very narrow slice of what engineers actually do. It's kind of like saying Excel replaces accountants because it can add numbers faster. Sure, but who decides what numbers matter? Who designs the financial model? Software isn't about writing functions. It's about designing the systems that work in the real world with, trade-offs and ambiguity and all. But, we have to be fair here. AI isn't useless. It's actually amazing at the repetitive, kind of low-level parts of programming that no one really likes to do anyway. Things like boilerplate code, syntax lookups, unit tests, refactoring suggestions. AI can speed all of that up. You could kind of think of it as like a power tool. The best carpenters, they didn't disappear like overnight when nail guns were invented. They just stopped wasting time hammering nails and started building things faster. And that's what's happening in software right now, right? The engineers who learn to use AI and not fear it are going to be way more productive than they ever have been before. We're moving away from the paradigm of engineers just being code typers, typing out code all day, where now they are systems designers, right? Spending less time typing out for loops and more time thinking about architecture and data flow, reliability, things like the human experience, right? So AI is just shifting the goalposts for what, but not the why. So let's talk about the deeper reason why AI can't replace software engineers just yet. And maybe it never will. And that's called systems thinking, right? So systems thinking is the ability to understand how different parts of a system interact, how a change in one place can ripple across the entire system. And AI doesn't think that way. It's great at local optimization, at, making one piece of code look really, really correct, but it really struggles with global coherence. That's why AI-generated systems often have these subtle inconsistencies, right? Functions that don't quite integrate, variable names that don't quite match, edge cases that it just never considered. Humans, especially experienced engineers, have an intuitive model of how things fit together. When you've debugged, a distributed system at 2 a.m. because one microservice didn't handle time zones correctly, you start to see software as a living ecosystem, full of dependencies and constraints and trade-offs. And AI doesn't have that experience. It can't learn from pain or from production incidents, right? From all the weird human factors that shape real systems. And that's the part that's hard to automate, the judgment that comes from experience. But what if we try to flip that question, right? If AI can't replace engineers today, could it in the future? So maybe, but not in the way most people imagine, right? The next leap won't come from AI getting better at syntax. It's going to come from AI getting better at reasoning, at understanding systems, not just describing them. We're already seeing hints of that with agents that can plan tasks and write test code and deploy changes, and even fix bugs autonomously. And that's some seriously impressive progress. But there is still a ceiling, right? Because at some point, software stops just being about code and it starts being about people. Every piece of software exists to serve a user, to solve a human problem. And humans are messy, right? We change our minds, we have conflicting priorities, we value trust and usability and design in ways that can't be necessarily reduced to data. So until, an AI can sit in a product meeting and hear 5 different stakeholders argue about what done means and still make a good technical decision, I think we're safe. There's also another more complex reason why AI won't replace engineers soon, and that's called emergent complexity. What that means is the larger a system grows, the less predictable it becomes. Even the engineers who built massive scaled systems like Google Search or AWS, they don't fully understand how every part of them work anymore, right? But that's okay because humans are great at managing that complexity through abstraction, through abstract layers. We build mental models, we design architectures, and we enforce contracts between different services. But AI doesn't build abstractions intentionally. It just copies the patterns. So the moment you ask it to do something truly new, something that doesn't already exist in its training data, it starts doing what's called hallucinations. That's making things up that don't exist and don't make sense. And that's not intelligence, just autocomplete with extra steps. AI is going to dramatically shift what engineers do and who can do it. We're already seeing non-engineers using tools like GPT or Cursor to write prototype ideas without knowing how to code. And that's awesome because it means more people can bring more ideas to life. But it also means the bar for professional engineers is going to continue to rise, right? If AI can handle 60% of the grunt work, then that remaining 40%, the human part that still needs a person, that's going to be the hard stuff. Architecting systems, designing APIs that can scale and integrating with legacy infrastructure, right? Those kinds of things. So yeah, AI won't end software engineering, but it will end the version of it that's purely about typing out code, right? The future engineer isn't just going to be a coder. It's going to be someone who solves problems and probably uses AI as an extension of that problem solving. You still need to understand logic and algorithms and architecture, but you also need to know how to ask good questions, design prompts, validate the output, and expect reasonable trade-offs. It's less about, can you code this, and more about can you design the right system and use AI to effectively build it. And that's the skill that's going to continue to define engineers going forward over the next generations. We're going to use it to accelerate, to explore, to automate the boring parts so you can focus on the interesting ones, right? Learning to think in systems, to design change, to reason beyond what's written. Because the engineers who master that, the ones who can guide AI instead of being replaced by it, are going to define the future of the industry. So if you found that helpful, please like the video, drop your hot takes on AI in the comments, or maybe how you've used AI already to change your workflow. And if you'd like to see more videos on software in the tech industry, follow the channel. There'll be more coming soon.